right, here we go. I'd like to deviate from my usual format a little bit and give a little bit of a political speech. I'm looking at the situation in the United States. I'm upset because I can't go to church, basically. That's really motivating this speech. It's very hard to accept, hard to understand. I don't agree at all. And I'd like to express my opinion and explain my reasoning. I guess it comes down to what I've heard from doctors. The CDC, Center for Disease Control in the United States, did not recommend we wear masks for up to 3 months. And the reasoning was it wasn't going to do any good because the masks were not airtight. Only certain masks work. A cloth mask, these doctors said, the virus is so microscopic, a cloth mask is ineffective. It will pass straight through the cloth. Basically, this virus is so tiny and so light, it would be like you walking through a door that's 100 feet tall and 100 feet wide. That's how easily it passes through cloth. And so the 6-foot rule, which is the justification for the removal of our freedom to assemble in public, which is the foundational right of the First Amendment, was supposed to be the law of the government of the United States, it's all based on this idea that if you stay 6 feet away from someone, the virus can't reach you. It can only float a magical 6 feet. Then what? It gets extremely heavy and plummets to the ground immediately? It's absurd. This virus is so tiny and so light, even in a room. If one part of the room is warmer and the other part of the room is more cool, heat rises. That creates an air current. It will actually float in the air current that is created by that slight change in temperature. That's how light this is. So even within a room, you can't control it. And outside, where there's wind, you could be 100 feet away and it will carry in the wind and it will reach you. So this whole idea that we can never assemble, no more crowds, because we'd be closer than 6 feet away, is ridiculous. There's not a doctor in America that believes that's true. That is not a medical fact. That is absurd. This thing is so tiny and so light outside, it will certainly float more than 6 feet. So there is no reason to abolish crowds because it will float everywhere, no matter what you do. I'm in a state where the only people in my state, you can't, if you go to a church gathering, you have to stay in your car. It's the only group in the state that can't get out of their car. You go to a park, you go to the beach, you go to a golf course, but if you go to a church building, you have to stay in the car in the parking lot. Wow. Based on what? We're supposed to have the right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech and freedom of assembly and freedom of the press in the United States. It's the First Amendment. And a governor is not a king. He can't just outlaw working and outlaw religion. It's not legal. It's not a lawful order. We have legislatures. You can't just bypass the legislature and arbitrarily make all kinds of ridiculous laws that are unnecessary and ineffectual. They don't accomplish anything. Because this thing's going to flow through the air. You can't stop the wind. So I disagree. And it's not necessary. It's not working. It's impossible. That's these masks. They're not airtight. Outside, it's going to flow through the air. So, and if you don't have enough beds to help people that get sick, then you enlarge your medical system's capacity. You build more beds. You don't take the 90% of the people in the United States that are never going to need medical attention, that are healthy and able to work, and outlaw working. That's stupid. It's not going to work anyway. You're just going to create a depression. It's not going to help your medical system be able to handle this. And 80% of the people have a natural immunity to it anyway. That's why they don't get sick. Don't even know they had it. And Typhoid Mary came to America in like 1900 from Ireland. She was infected with typhoid. And for 14 years, all over the United States, she was a cook. And everywhere she went, people got typhoid. She never got sick. She just carried the virus and spread it. And so basically we're dealing with a virus here where 80% of the people that contract it are asymptomatic and they spread it when they breathe out. They'll never get sick. And Typhoid Mary spread typhoid all over America for 14 years before they finally, tracked her down and said, you can't be a cook anymore. Everywhere she went, people contracted typhoid. So, we've basically got a disease here where we can spread it asymptomatically and we're never going to get sick. We're just going to keep spreading it because it comes out when you breathe. And so you can't outlaw crowds. You can't just, the quarantines only work with a disease that can be spread while you have the symptoms. Some flus for a day or two before you get sick, you can be able to spread it. But this is a type of flu where you can never get sick and just keep spreading it. So it's totally different. Like if you put someone in quarantine for 2 weeks, they come out of quarantine, they're still asymptomatically spreading it. You've accomplished nothing just because they didn't get sick for 2 weeks while they didn't work. So my opinion is that we need to let everyone who can work. Work is essential to the people who had the job because that's how they fed themselves and kept from being homeless. And I've seen what happens to homeless people in the United States. They're given nothing. They're left to die and starve on the sidewalk. And it wasn't a lack of money because we came up with trillions of dollars within weeks. So, just like we can build beds for sick people that get the flu, we can take all these people that are drunks and drug addicts and mentally ill and give them homeless shelters and give them sanitation and food and shelter, basic human needs, so they at least have a possibility of now getting a job. But if you don't even have a residence, you can never get a job. So, we need to just give basic shelter to our homeless population, and we need to let people work so they don't become homeless, and we need to expand our medical system and create more beds if that's necessary, if we're going to have a lot of people who need them. But I would say the 90% of the people in America that are never going to need medical attention, even if they contract this disease, need to work. You cannot outlaw working. That is not a solution. And you cannot outlaw crowds forever. That's, again, there's no need of it. It can't work. Like, this thing floats in the air outside. Doesn't matter if you're 6 feet away or 100 feet away, it's going to float through the air. So, this idea we're going to outlaw crowds in America, outlaw the right to assemble, you can never stand closer than 6 feet to people and make them wear masks that aren't doing anything. It's ridiculous. And you're going to bankrupt the United States. You're going to destroy your country. You're going to create homelessness and poverty and all kinds of problems that for nothing, for something that's not working. You know, Japan never locked down. They wore masks, but they never locked down. They never stopped. And they got like 500 deaths out of 120 million people. You know, Sweden, you know, South Korea, it's got like 400 or 500 deaths. So these measures aren't working, and they're just taking away our rights, and they're just creating poverty all over the country. I don't even think it's legal. You can't just take away the First Amendment for measures that don't work, don't accomplish anything. If you have a healthcare problem, you don't just tell people they can't work. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to solve your healthcare problem. You'll have no tax revenue. You won't be able to help your health system. So, you know, I think we have to be able to support ourselves, and you should expand your healthcare system. And so that's my opinion. And I wanted to share that because, you know, this idea, well, until we stop the virus, we can't do anything else. We can't have an economy. We can't work. We can't go anywhere. That's madness. It's ridiculous. That's like a captain of a battleship who's got a hole, and he's got 100 holes in a leaky boat. And all he wants to talk about is this one hole that's taking on water, when there's 100 other holes that are taking on water. And there's thousands of people on the boat. They have to eat, they have to sleep, they have to work, they have to maintain 100 other things on that boat to keep that boat from sinking. You have to take care of everything at once. You don't just stop everything. This is not reasonable. It's not logical, and it's very destructive. And it's not working. You know, that's why the CDC didn't say wear masks for 3 months, because they knew it wouldn't work. You can't stop the wind. It's getting out in the air, and it's going to spread. And eventually, we'll have a herd immunity. And we already do. 80% of the people don't even get sick. So there's already quite an immunity to this. What we need to do is anyone who has a healthcare issue that makes them more vulnerable and dangerous to, you know, that they could contract it. If you have a weak immune system or some kind of respiratory problem, you know, your heart's vulnerable, lack of oxygen and everything, then you should stay away from people. You should self-isolate. And we need to take care of those people, get them food, keep them housed, you know. But everyone else needs to keep working, pay taxes, keep the government able to function, and help expand the medical system, and you know, help the United States. I mean, this is crazy. They're shutting down factories and meat packing, meat processing. Children aren't being educated. Like, that's not the answer to a healthcare problem. You know, expand your medical system. That's the answer. It's not working. It's going to create a whole bunch of other problems. You're going to have massive unemployment. All these states, they're going to have to lay off their employees because they're not going to have any tax revenue. You're going to have to raise taxes on the people that are still working because the state's not going to have enough money. And just creating all kinds of other problems. The real problem is, you know, expand your healthcare system. So that's my opinion. I want to express that. And if you agree, then click a like or subscribe. Maybe more people will listen, and hopefully the governor will let people work for a living so they don't end up homeless and starving with no rights at all, which is what happens to poverty-stricken people. Unemployed people become homeless. All these homeless people all over America, they once had jobs. Some of them are quite educated. Maybe they got a substance abuse problem. Maybe they're a drunk or a drug addict. They got mental health problems. But they once were employed. If you don't work, the government can't pay unemployment when it doesn't have any tax revenue. So, I ask that anyone who listens to this would, like it and share it, subscribe, and pass it on, because this isn't working. You can't just shut down all work every time someone gets sick. That person needs to self-isolate or get medical attention if they need it, but you have to keep everything running. You can't just stop all of life. It's not going to cure your flu problem. That's going to continue and persist and travel all around the world like every other flu throughout human history. So every year, and eventually there'll be more and more people who become immune to it. So that's my opinion. I want to express that and get that off my chest, and I appreciate you for listening, and thank you for your time.